Huainanzi Chapter 19 and 20. 1919.1 Some people say, those who are non-active are solitarily soundless and indifferently unmoving. 1. Pull them, and they do not come, push them, and they do not go. Only those who are like this give the appearance of having attained the way. I believe this is not so. I might ask them, is it possible to refer to such men as the divine farmer, Yao, Shun, Yu, and Tang as sages? Even those who hold to this view of non-action certainly could not contend otherwise. But if you examine these 5 sages, it is clear that none of them achieved non-action. In ancient times, the people fed on herbaceous plants and drank only water, picked fruit from shrubs and trees and ate the meat of oysters and clams. They frequently suffered tribulations from feverish maladies and injurious poisons. Consequently, the divine farmer first taught the people to plant and cultivate the 5 grains. He evaluated the suitability of the land, noting whether it was dry or wet, fertile or barren, high or low. He tried the taste and flavor of the 100 plants and the sweetness or bitterness of the streams and springs, issuing directives so the people would know what to avoid and what to accept. At the time he was doing this, he suffered poisoning as many as 70 times a day. Yao established filial piety, compassion, humaneness, and love, inspiring the people to become like sons and brothers. To the west, he taught the people of the fertile lands; to the east, he reached the Black-Teeth people; to the north, he soothed the Yutu people, and to the south he made inroads to Jiazai. 2. He exiled Huan Do 3 to Mount Chang, pursued the 3 Miao tribes to 3 Dangers Mountain, banished Gong Gong to Yizhou, and executed Gun at Feather Mountain. 4. Shun created homes. Constructing walls and thatching roofs, opening lands and planting grains, he directed all the people to abandon their caves and each to establish a family dwelling. These are the practices he initiated. To the south he chastised the 3 Miao tribes, dying along the way at Zhangguo. Yu, bathed by torrential rains and combed by violent winds, cleared the waterways and dredged the rivers, bored through Dragon Gate, opened up Yin Pass, repaired the embankments of Pengli i.e., Boyang Lake, mounted the 4 vehicles, 5, followed the mountains and marked their trees. Leveling and ordering the water and land so as to determine the boundaries of the 1800 states. Tang rose early and retired late to take full advantage of his perspicacious intelligence, reduced taxes and lightened demands to enhance the people's livelihood, displayed virtue and bestowed favor to rescue the impoverished and bereft. He mourned the dead and inquired about the afflicted to take care of orphans and widows. Consequently the common people grew close to and cleaved to him. His policies and directives flowed forth and circulated everywhere. Thus he subsequently marshaled his troops at Mingtiao, surrounded Ji of the Xia at Nanguo, punished him for his transgressions, and banished him to Mount Li. These 5 sages were rulers who made the world flourish. They labored their bodies and used their minds to the utmost on behalf of the people to bring benefit and eradicate harm, yet they never tired of doing so. Now if you raise a beaker of wine, no one would notice the strain from your face, but if you lift a vat weighing a dan, sweat will flow profusely. How much more so will this be the case if you take on the worries of the world and assume responsibility for all the affairs within the 4 seas. This is far heavier than a vat weighing a dan. Moreover, these sages were not embarrassed by their humble status but regretted that the way did not prevail, were not anxious about their brief lifespans but worried that the people were impoverished. For this reason, when Yu acted on the waterways, he used his own body to break through the banks of the Yangtze River, and Tang, at the time of the great drought, offered himself as a sacrifice at the edge of Mulberry Forest. If the sages' solicitousness for the people was as clear as this, is it not deluded to accuse them of being non-active? 19/202/12, 30 Furthermore, in ancient times when emperors and kings were established, it was not to serve and nourish their own desires; when sages took office, it was not to indulge and delight their own persons. It was because in the world, the strong oppress the weak, the many violated the few, the clever deceived the ignorant, and the brave dispossessed the timid. Those who possessed knowledge did not impart it, those who accumulated wealth did not distribute it. 6. Thus the Son of Heaven was established in order to equalize them. Since one person's intelligence was not sufficient to shed light on all things within the 4 seas, the 3 dukes and the 9 ministers were established to aid and assist him. Since inaccessible states with varied customs and remote and secluded locales could not receive and be enriched by the ruler's virtue, lords of the land were established to instruct and admonish them. This made it so that no land was untended, no season was not met with its proper response, no official concealed his activities, no state neglected to benefit the people. By these means, they clothed the cold and fed the hungry, nourished the old and infirm, and gave respite to those wearied from their labors. Moreover, if you look at the sages from the perspective of the common man, 7. Then the cook Yi Yin, with cauldron on his back, sought to serve Tang, the butcher Liu An, with carving knife in hand. Entered Zhou to serve as a high official. 8. Bailey she was sold back to Duke Mu of Qin. 9. Guanzhong was tied and fettered and taken to the court of Duke Huan of Qi. Confucius's stove was not black, and Mozi's mat was not warm. 10. Thus it is that sages do not consider mountains high, do not consider rivers wide. They withstand insult and humiliation in order to seek to serve a ruler of their age. They do not crave high salaries or covet official posts, but instead want to work to advance the world's benefits and eradicate the common people's hardships. In a work that has been transmitted to us it is written, the divine farmer was haggard and downcast, Yao was emaciated and forlorn, Shun was weather-beaten and dark, and you had calloused hands and feet. Looking at it from this perspective, the sage's anxious toiling for the common people is profound indeed. Thus from the Son of Heaven down to the common people, when the 4 limbs are not exercised and thought and forethought are not applied, yet the tasks of governance are addressed and resolved, such a thing has never been heard of. 19/203/1, 1019.2 The propensity of terrain is such that water flows east, but people must work on it so that the flood waters flow through the valleys. Grain and crops grow in the spring, but people must apply their efforts to them so that the 5 grains can reach maturity. If they had let the water flow naturally or waited for the plants to grow by themselves, the accomplishments of Gun and Yu would not have been established, and the wisdom of Lord Millet would not have been employed. What I call non-action means not allowing private ambitions to interfere with the public way, not allowing lustful desires to distort upright techniques. It means complying with the inherent patterns of things when initiating undertakings, according with the natural endowments of things when establishing accomplishments, and advancing the natural propensities of things so that misguided precedents are not able to dominate. Thus, the undertakings of government will succeed, but you personally will not be glorified. 11. Your accomplishments will be established, but your reputation will not obtain. Non-action does not mean that a stimulus will not produce a response or that a push will not move something. If you use fire to dry out a well or use the Huai River to irrigate a mountain, these are cases of using personal effort in contradiction of the natural course of things. Thus I would call such activities taking deliberate action. But if on the water you use a boat, in the sand you use a shoe, in the mud you use a chun, in the mountains you use a lei, 12. In the summer you dig ditches, in the winter you pile up dikes. In accordance with a high place you make a mound, and following a low one you dig a pond. These activities are not what I would call deliberate action. 19/203/12 1819.3 As sages carry out their affairs, they differ in specific details but agree on matters of principle. They start out along different paths but return to the same place. 13. In preserving their states against danger and stabilizing them against collapse, they are as one, and their wills never deviate from the desire to bring benefit to others. How might I illuminate this point? Long ago, Chu wanted to attack Song. Mozi heard about it and was deeply grieved over it, so he left Lu and hurried off toward Chu, traveling for 10 days and 10 nights. Although his feet swelled with blisters, he did not stop, he tore his clothes into shreds to bandage his feet instead. Arriving at Ying, he had an audience with the king of Chu and said, "I 14 have heard that the great king is raising troops in preparation for an attack on Song. Do you attack Song because you are certain to get it? Or do you attack Song despite making life bitter for the masses, overworking the people, exhausting your army, and destroying their weaponry, thereby shouldering a reputation for being unjust in the world, even though you gain not a single inch of territory?" The king replied, "If I were certain not to get Song and, moreover, I would be considered unjust, why would I attack it?" Mozi said, "Splendid. I will show you that the great king will certainly harm his reputation of being just and not get Song." The king responded, "But Gong Shaban, the most skilled artisan in the world, is making a cloud ladder 15 device in preparation for the attack on Song. How could I not take Song?" Mozi replied, "I request that if you should allow Gongsha to prepare the attack, you give me permission to defend Song." Subsequently, Gong Shaban prepared the device to attack Song, and Mozi prepared the provisions to defend Song. Gong Shaban made 9 attacks and Mozi 9 times repelled him. Chu could not enter Song. Finally Chu's troops retreated and called off the attack on Song. 16 Duan Ganmu declined an official salary and remained at home. When Marquis Wen of Wei passed by his village gate, he bowed from his chariot. His driver asked, "My lord, why did you bow from your chariot?" Marquis Wen said, "Duan Ganmu is here. This is why I bowed." The driver said, "Duan Ganmu is a scholar who wears simple attire. For my lord to bow at his village gate, is this not excessive?" Marquis Wen replied, "Duan Ganmu does not chase after power and profit. He embraces the way of the superior man, secluding himself in an impoverished lane, his reputation spreads 1,000 li. How could I presume not to bow? Duan Ganmu is resplendent because of his virtue, I am resplendent because of my power. Duan Ganmu is rich in rightness, I am rich in wealth. Power is not as honorable as virtue, wealth is not as lofty as rightness. Even if Duan Ganmu could change places with me, he would not do so. All day long I am saddened and embarrassed by my shadow. 17 How could I scorn him?" Some time later, Qin raised troops to attack Wei, but Sima Yu18 admonished the ruler of Qin, saying, "Duan Ganmu is a worthy, and his ruler has treated him with propriety. There is no one in the world who does not recognize this. None among the lords of the land has failed to hear of this. If you raise troops and attack his state, does not this amount to hindering rightness?" Thereupon Qin demobilized its troops and did not attack Wei. Now Mozi, tripping and stumbling, hastened 10,000 li to preserve Chu and Song, but Duan Ganmu, by shutting his gate and refusing to come out, brought peace to Qin and Wei. As for going or staying, their propensities opposed each other, but both could preserve a state. This is what I mean by they start out along different paths but return to the same place. Now, those who extinguish a fire draw water from the well and hasten to the fire. Some use a jug or a bottle, while others use a tub or a basin. Their squareness or roundness, angularity or smoothness, is not alike. In how much water they hold, they are all different, but for extinguishing a fire, they are all equal. Thus, the singing of Qin, Chu, Yan, and Wei have different traditions, but all are joyful. The wailing of the 9 Yi and the 8 Di tribes have different sounds, but all are sorrowful. Now singing is evidence of joy, 19 and wailing is the product of grief. An ardent feeling internally is manifested as a response externally. The cause of the response lies in the feeling itself. 20 Thus the hearts of sages never deviate, day and night, from the desire to benefit others. The scope of their beneficence reaching so far, the results are correspondingly great. 19/203/20, 19/204/11. 19.4 When the customary usages of an age fall into disuse and decline and those who repudiate learning become numerous, they say, people's natures possess strengths and weaknesses, just as fish are swift and cranes are party-colored. This is something natural that cannot be diminished or enhanced. 21 I believe this is not so. That fish are swift and cranes are party-colored is analogous to what makes people people and what makes horses horses, insofar as their muscles, bones, frame, and body, which they receive from heaven, cannot be altered. Judging the issue from this perspective, they are not the same in kind. Now when a horse is a young colt, it jumps and kicks, raises its tail and runs, and people cannot control it. Its bite is strong enough to pierce flesh and break bones, and its kick is hard enough to break a skull or crush a chest. But when a groom tames it or a fine charioteer trains it, he restrains it with bridle and harness and leads it with rein and bit, so that even if it must cross a precipice or leap a ditch, it would not dare to shy away. Thus, its form makes it a horse, and a horse cannot be transformed into anything else. That the horse can be mounted and ridden is achieved through training. A horse is a dumb brute, and yet it is possible to penetrate its vital energy and will by relying on training to perfect the horse. How much more is this true of people? 19/204/13, 18 Moreover, those whose persons were upright and whose natures were good, who radiated their ardor to perfect their humaneness, 22 Who relied on their discontent to act with rightness, whose nature and destiny could be a source of pleasure, and who did not need to rely on study and inquiry to tally with the way, were Yao, Shun, and King Wen. Those who indulged deeply in wine and sex, whose conduct was unrestrained, who could not be instructed by means of the way or taught by the example of virtue, whom a stern father could not correct, whom a worthy teacher could not transform, were Danzu and Shangjun. 23 Those with delicate, tender faces and brilliant white teeth, whose figures were beautiful and whose bone structure was elegant, who did not need to rely on cream and powder or perfume and unguents, and who by nature could please others, were Shi and Yang Wen. Those who were ugly and grotesque, whose mouths were large, and whose teeth were crooked, whose bellies were fat and whose backs were hunched, and who applied white powder and black mascara but could not be made beautiful were Momu and Bai Sui. Now those who in loftiness do not reach Yao and Shun, in baseness do not compare with Shangjun, who in beauty do not reach Shi, and who in ugliness do not compare with Momu, are those to whom education and instruction are conveyed and to whom perfume and unguents are applied. Furthermore, a son may kill his father, but the fathers of the world do not cast away their sons as a result. Why? It is because most sons love their fathers. A Confucian may be wicked and corrupt, but people do not abandon the way of the former kings as a result. Why? It is because most Confucians put it into practice. Now, rejecting study because those who study have faults is like taking one instance of choking to refuse grain and not eat, or taking one problem with stumbling to stop walking and not go anywhere. This is deluded. 19/204/20, 27 Now a fine horse needs no whips or spurs to go. A poor quality horse, even if whips and spurs were doubled, would not proceed. But never to use whips and spurs for this reason would be foolish. Now a coward may wield a sharp sword, but if he struck, he could not cut, and if he stabbed, he could not pierce. In the case of a brave warrior, with one blow he could rend the flesh and wound the body. If on account of this, you were to abandon the blades of legendary swordsmiths Ganjong and Moya and use your fists to fight instead, this would be perverse. What I mean to say is, abide by the majority and conform to the customary. When you are not praising the heights of the 9 heavens, you are speaking of the depths of the yellow springs. This amounts to discussing the limits of 2 extremes. How can these extremes be the basis for general assessments? 19/205/1, 5 Oranges and pomelos 24 grow in winter, but people say winter brings death, for most things die in winter. Shepherd's purse and wheat die in the summer, but people say summer brings growth because most things grow in summer. The twists and turns of the Yangtze and the Yellow rivers sometimes flow north and sometimes flow south, but people say that they flow eastward. Jupiter and Saturn move eastward day by day and month by month, but people say that the stars and planets shift westward day by day and month by month. They take the majority as their basis. Among the Hu people are those who are knowledgeable and principled, but people call them stupid. Among the Yu people are those who are dull-witted and slow, but people call them clever. They consider the majority when naming them. Now, Yao's eyebrows were of 8 colors, and his body's 9 apertures all flowed into one another. 25 He was public-minded, upright, and devoid of personal preferences. With one pronouncement, the multitudes were united. Shun had 2 pupils in each eye. This was called double discernment. What he did became laws, and what he said became statutes. Yu's ears had 3 openings. This was called great penetration. He increased benefits and eradicated harms, clearing the waterways and dredging the rivers. King Wen had 4 nipples. This was called great humaneness. The world returned home to him, and the common people grew close to him. Dao Yao 26 had a horse-like mouth. This was called utter trustworthiness. He judged cases with clarity and brilliance as he judiciously examined human emotions. Xie 27 was born from an egg, Qi 28 was born from a stone, Shi Huang 29 was born and could write, Yi was born with a long left 30 arm and was an outstanding archer. 9 such worthies as these appeared only once in 1,000 years, yet it was as if they followed on one another's heels. Nowadays we are bereft of the heavenly blessings of these 5 sages or the flourishing talent of these 4 worthies. Under such circumstances wanting to abandon study and follow nature is like abandoning a boat in the hopes that you will walk on water. When precious swords like Chungo and Yuchain were first taken from their molds, if you sliced with them, they would not cut, if you stabbed with them, they would not pierce. But once enhanced by polishing and grinding and rubbed until their points were sharp, in water they could cut through a dragon boat, and on land they could slash through rhinoceros hide armor. 31 When a mirror is first taken from its mold, it is hazy and does not yet reflect form or shape. When it is coated with dark tin powder and rubbed with a clean felt cloth, you can distinguish clearly the fine hair of the temples and eyebrows. Now, learning is a person's whetstone and tin. To say that learning does not enhance a person is a statement that refutes itself. 19/205/7, 2019.5 The weakness of a wise person in some field makes him not as good in that field as a foolish person who is strong in it. The deficits of a worthy in some field make him not as good in that field as an ordinary person who surpasses in it. 32 How do I know this is so? With song painting and wu smelting, the carving of molds and the engraving of patterns are complex and intricate. Their creation of such subtle mysteries, even the sages Yao and Shun could not achieve. The young girls of Cai and the talented youth of Wei in weaving their red waistbands, in blending their marvelous colors, in forming their black backgrounds, and displaying their crimson patterns do what even the wisdom of Yu and Tang could not attain. 19/205/2224 What heaven covers, what earth supports, is contained within the 6 coordinates, is embraced within the universe. 33 What yin and yang produce from the essence of blood and qi are creatures that have a mouthful of teeth or a head bearing horns, 34 Front claws or rear hooves, soaring wings, or clutching talons that advance by wriggling or move by crawling. When happy, they are harmonious, when angry, they are quarrelsome, seeing benefit, they pursue it, avoiding harm, they withdraw from it. Their instinctive responses in this respect are one. Although in their likes and dislikes they do not differ from people, nonetheless, though their claws and teeth are sharp, though their muscles and bones are strong, they cannot avoid being controlled by people because they cannot communicate their intelligence to one another. And their abilities and strength cannot be made to act as one. Each has its natural propensity that is not endowed or received from the outside. Thus their strengths have boundaries, and their accomplishments have limits. Now the wild goose follows the wind to fly in order to preserve its energy and strength. It holds straw in its mouth while soaring in order to fend off tethered arrows. Ants know how to build hills, badgers 35 make their winding tunnel, tigers and leopards have layers of grass. Wild boars have grassy nests, rows of felled trees, and burrowed holes that join one another in the manner of palaces and rooms. They provide protection to guard them from the rain and shield them from the hot sun. Thus even birds and beasts know ways to seek out and accord with what brings them benefit. Now suppose a person were born in a secluded and remote state and grew up in a leaking room in a poor house, was reared without older and younger brothers, and from childhood was bereft of father and mother. If in addition his eyes never witnessed proper rites, his ears never heard of former or ancient times, and he lived alone in his own home without going beyond his gate, even if by nature he was not stupid, nonetheless his knowledge would certainly be wanting. 19/205/26, 19/206/8 Long ago Kang Ji invented writing, Rong Cheng created the calendar, Hu Cao 36 made clothing, Lord Millet introduced agriculture, Yi Di invented wine, and Shi Zhong made carts. These 6 men all had the way of spirit illumination and left behind footprints of sagely wisdom. 37 Thus each person invented something and bequeathed it to posterity. It is not the case that a single person alone would have been able to do all of them. Each fully applied his knowledge, prizing what he hoped to achieve, so that subsequently each provided something for the world. Now if you had made these 6 men exchange their tasks, their brilliance would not have been apparent. Why? It is because the myriad things of the world are utterly numerous and knowledge is not sufficient to encompass them all. From the Zhou era onward, there have been no worthies like these 6, and yet people have pursued all their callings. Among the people of the current age, there is not a single person of that caliber, yet people have come to know the way of the 6 worthies. Education and training extended and continued their work so that their knowledge could flow forth and communicate with later ages. From this perspective, it is clear that learning can never cease. 19/206/10, 14 Now in the case of a blind person, his eyes cannot distinguish day from night or differentiate white from black, nevertheless when he grasps the chain and plucks the strings, triply plucking and doubly pressing, 38 touching and plucking, pulling and releasing. His hands are like a blur, and he never misses a string. If we tried to get someone who had never played the chain to do this, though possessing the clear sight of Li Zhu or the nimble fingers of Zhu Duo, 39 it would be as if he could neither contract nor extend a finger. What is the reason for this? Such things are made possible only through repeated practice, so they become habitual. Thus, the bow must await the stringing frame before it can be strung, and the sword must await the whetstone before it can be sharpened. Jade is harder than anything else, but it can be carved into the shape of beasts, the heads and the tails taking their true forms. This is the achievement of the abrasive stone. 40 Wood may be as straight as a marking cord, but if it is shaped to make a wheel, its bending will match the compass. This is the power of the bending frame. Things as hard as Tang jade can still be carved, it can be formed and made into useful things. How much more so is this the case with the human heart and mind? 19/206/16, 20 Moreover, the quintessential spirit is saturating and soaking, subtle and fine. 41 Suddenly and quickly it alters and transforms in accordance with things, it moves and shifts like the clouds rising and the winds drifting, it establishes and applies itself where it is most useful. Among superior men are those who can arouse the essence and examine the infinitesimal, polish and grind their talents, spontaneously exercise their spirit illumination. 42 Observe the broad spectrum of things, penetrate the obstructions of things, observe the clues to beginning and end. Perceive the realm that has no exterior, wander freely within the limitless, meander beyond the dust of the world. Splendidly, they stand alone, loftily, they leave the world. Such are the means by which the mind of the sage wanders. However, people of later ages did not have the leisure to sit and still their thoughts, playing the chine and reading books, reflecting on observations of high antiquity, befriending worthies and great men, studying and debating, daily gaining self-mastery. Delving into and analyzing the affairs of their age, distinguishing and differentiating white from black, estimating successes and losses, foretelling disasters and blessings, setting up norms and establishing rules to serve as laws and regulations. Investigating thoroughly the roots and branches of the way, studying deeply the essential qualities of things, establishing what is so and eradicating what is not so, illuminating and instructing later generations, in death, leaving a legacy, in life, possessing a glorious reputation. Things like this are what human talent can achieve. But if no one can accomplish such things, it is because people are lazy and lax and have many idle days. Now, among people who come from regions where the soil is barren, there are many who have good minds. This is because their lives are laborious. Among people who come from places where the soil is rich, there are many who are devoid of talents. This is because their lives are easy. Looking at it from this perspective, a wise person who makes no effort does not compare with a foolish person who loves to learn. From the rulers, dukes, and ministers on down to the common people, there has never been a case of someone succeeding without exerting himself to the utmost. The Ode says, "The days pass and the months proceed, through study of brightness and brilliance, I gain radiance and light." 43 This is what is referred to here. 19/206/22, 19/207/6 19.6 Reputation can be established through effort, merit can be achieved through fortitude. Thus the superior man musters his will and commits himself to uprightness, hastening toward brilliant teachers, encourages moderation and exalts loftiness, separating himself from the conventions of his age. How might I illuminate this point? Formerly, Nan Rong Jo 44 was ashamed that he alone lacked the sagely way. Therefore, immersing himself in frost and dew, arranging his sandals and hastening his steps, he climbed mountains and forded rivers, shielding his eyes from brambles and thorns, going 100 stages 45 with his feet covered with blisters, not daring to rest. He reached the south and met Lao Dan. Having received his instruction with a single word, his quintessential spirit was suddenly enlightened, his formerly obtuse and sad heart became orderly and lucid. He was so pleased that for 7 days he did not eat, although it was as if he had feasted on the Tailao. 46 Thus, his brilliance illuminated all within the 4 seas, and his reputation passed down to later generations. He could summarily comprehend heaven and earth and analyze something as fine as autumn floss. Recognition and praise of his merits have not ceased to this day. This is what is meant by reputation can be established through effort. When Wu and Chu 47 fought each other, the Chu Undersecretary Cheng Daxin 48 grasped his charioteer's hand and said, "Today we confront a powerful enemy. We will repel the glistening blades and shield ourselves from arrows and stones. If I die in battle, I still will win victory by preserving the people whole, so that our altars of soil and grain will be able to remain intact." Subsequently he pressed forward but did not retreat, for he was stabbed in the abdomen and beheaded in battle. Never turning his heels to reverse course, he died. Shen Baoxu 49 declared, "If I give my all and fight this terrible enemy and fall as a bleeding corpse, I will show only the ability of an ordinary soldier. This is not so good as humbling myself and speaking self-deprecatingly and seeking aid from the lords of the land." Thereupon, he packed his grain on his back and traveled barefoot, fording streams and treading valleys, ascending to the highest peaks, descending to the deepest gullies, crossing rivers and streams, defying rapids and mountain passes, striding past hidden snares, stumbling through sand and stone until the whole area from his feet to his knees was swollen and covered with many large blisters. He journeyed for 7 days and 7 nights before he reached the court of Qin. Standing on one leg like a crane and refusing sustenance, by day he moaned and by night he wailed, his face as if dead ashes, his coloring swarthy and dark, his tears ran down his face to collect in a pool. When he met the king of Qin, he declared, Wu is like mound pig or long snake. 50. It wants to gobble up the upper states. 51. The disaster began in Chu. Our ruler has lost his altars of soil and grain. He has fled to live amid the grasses and reeds. The population has fled and dispersed, and husbands and wives, men and women, do not have a moment to inform others of their whereabouts. I was sent to report the emergency. The king of Qin thereupon raised a force of 1,000 chariots and 70,000 foot soldiers and appointed Zihu to command them. They crossed the pass to the east and attacked Wu at the Zhou River, defeating Wu handily and thereby preserving Chu. Shen Baoxu's accomplishment was recorded in the court and among the official laws and proclamations. This is an example of merit attained through fortitude. 19/207/8, 22 For those with a frame 7 feet tall, 52 A heart that has borne anxiety, sadness, toil, and hardship, and skin that has felt pain, illness, heat, and cold, the instinctive responses of all people are the same. Sages know the difficulty of attaining the opportune time and that effort must be rendered quickly, so they mortify their bodies and belabor their forms, weary their hearts and vex their livers, never avoiding trouble and hardship, never abandoning danger and peril. In fact, I have heard that when Zifa battled, he advanced like a flying arrow, met the enemy like thunder and lightning, and dispersed them like rain and wind. He was round as a compass and square as a carpenter's square. He defeated his enemies and broke through their formations, none could withstand him. When fighting in the wetlands, he was always victorious, when attacking a city, it was sure to fall. It is not that he looked lightly on his person or rejoiced in death. Rather, he placed responsibility in front and left considerations of benefit behind. Thus his reputation was established and never faltered. This is an example of achieving merit through one's own fortitude. For this reason, if the tillers are not strong, the granaries and storerooms will not be full. If the officials and attendants are not disciplined, their hearts and minds will not achieve the essence. If generals and officers are not strong, their merit and fierceness will not succeed. If princes and kings are lazy, in later ages they will have no reputation. The Ode says, My horses are dappled, the rein soft as silk, I ride, I press on, everywhere seeking wise counsel. 53 This is to say that people have something to which they can apply their effort. 19/207/24, 19/208/219.7 Those who fully comprehend things cannot be startled by the unusual, those who are versed in the way cannot be moved by the strange, those who examine words cannot be dazzled by their designations, those who investigate into forms cannot be misled by their appearances. People who follow the conventions of the present age mostly revere the ancient and scorn the present. Thus those who formulate teachings of the way necessarily ascribe them to the divine farmer or the yellow emperor, only then will they proceed with their discussion. Muddled rulers of chaotic eras venerate what is remote and what proceeds therefrom, so they value such things. Those who study are blinded by their theories and respect only what they have heard. Facing one another, seated with a dignified air 54 They praise the ancients, stiff-necked they recite the ancient texts. This shows that the distinction between what is true and what is false is not clear. Now, without a square and a compass, even Shi Zhōn could not determine square and round, without a level and a marking cord, even Lu Ban 55 could not straighten the crooked. Thus, when Zongzi died, Bo Ya broke the strings and destroyed his qin, knowing that in his times no one could appreciate his playing. When Hui Shi died, Zhuangzi ceased to talk, perceiving that there was no one else with whom he could converse. 19/208/4, 9 At the age of 7, Xiang Tuo became Confucius's teacher. From time to time, Confucius listened to his words. If someone this young were to offer a persuasion to a village elder, though, the child would not have time to duck a blow on the head. How would he be able to illuminate the way under such circumstances? In the past, Ziza 56 had an audience with King Hui of Qin, 57, and the king was pleased with him. He asked Tanguliang 58 about him. Tanguliang said, Ziza is a debater from Shandong who uses clever persuasions to gain the confidence of young princes. King Hui accordingly hid his anger and awaited Ziza. The next day when Ziza had a second audience, the king rejected him and would not heed him. It is not that Ziza's persuasion differed but that the way in which the king heard it changed. If you mistake the note G for the note U, it is not the fault of the string. If you mistake a sweet taste for a bitter one, it is not the mistake of the flavor. A man from Chu had some boiled monkey meat that he gave to his neighbors. They thought it was dog meat and found its flavor pleasing. Later, when they heard it was monkey, they knelt down and vomited all they had eaten. This was a case of not even beginning to know about flavor. A music master from Handan made up a new tune and said it was composed by Li Qi. 59 All the people vied to learn it. Later when they discovered it was not written by Li Qi, they all abandoned the tune. This was a case of not even beginning to know about music. A country fellow found a rough piece of jade. Being pleased by its appearance, he considered it to be precious and hid it away. When he showed it to others, people considered that it was just a stone, so he threw it away. This was a case of not even beginning to know about jade. Thus when your views tally with what is essential, you will value what is true and give equal consideration to the present and the ancient. If you do not have the means to heed persuasions, then you will value what has come down from the past, simply because it is remote. This is why Bian he cried so hard that he bled at the foot of Mount Zheng. 60 Now, a sword may be broken off and bent, thin and scratched, chipped and broken and warped and twisted, but if it's said to have been the sword of King Qingxiang of Chu, then it is prized, and the people will compete to wear it. A chain may be twangy and sharp, crooked and bent, with its resonance gone and its aftertones excessive, but if it is said to have been the chain of King Zhuang of Chu, 61 then it is prized, and the favored 62 will contend to play it. Although the short-handled spears from Mount Miao and the cast-iron spear points of Sheep's Head Mountain can cut through a dragon boat in the water and pierce armor of rhinoceros hide on land, no one wears them on his belt. Although chains made of mountain tongwood with sounding boards of river valley catalpa wood may sound as pure, lingering and clear as the music of Master Tang 63 or Bo Ya, no one plays them. Those with penetrating discernment are not like this. The swordsman hopes for a sharp blade, he does not hope for the perfection of Moyang or Amoy. The horseman hopes for 1,000 li steed, he does not hope for the perfection of Hualiu or Luer. The chain player hopes for a pure, lingering, and clear sound, he does not hope for the perfection of Langzi or Huzhong. 64 One who studies by reciting the odes and the documents hopes to achieve a comprehensive understanding of the way and a general knowledge of things, he does not hope for the perfection of a great plan or an ode of Shang. 65 Sages perceive what is true and what is false. Just as what is white and black is distinguished by the eye and what is high-pitched and low-pitched is differentiated by the ears. But most people are not like this. Within themselves they lack a master by means of which to make such discernments. It is like a man who is born after his father dies. When in later years he climbs the tomb mound, he will wail and cry as ceremony demands, but nothing makes those feelings cleave to his heart. 19/208/11, 28 Thus, when a boy and his twin look alike, only their mother can distinguish them. When jade and ordinary stone are of the same sort, only a fine craftsman can identify them. When texts and chronicles record strange things, only sages can discuss them. Now, if we should get a new text from a sage and attribute it to Confucius or Mozi, then those disciples who point to every sentence and accept the text as genuine will certainly be numerous. Thus a beauty need not be of the same type as she, a knowledgeable scholar need not be of the same sort as Confucius or Mozi. If his mind has the perspicacious capacity to penetrate things, then he will write books to illustrate matters, and they will be taken up by the learned. A scholar who truly attains clear-minded understanding, who grasps the profound mirror in his mind, illuminating things brilliantly and not changing his mind on account of whether something is ancient or current, will accordingly propound his writings and clearly point out his views. Then, even though his coffin might close, he would have no regrets. 19/209/1, 5 Formerly Duke Ping of Jin ordered his officials to make a set of bells. When they were finished and presented to music master Kuang, the latter said, "The bells are not in tune." Duke Ping said, "I have shown them to skilled persons, 66, and they all think they are in tune. Yet you think they are not. Why?" Music master Kuang said, "If they are for those of later generations who have no knowledge of the notes, then they will do, but for those who know the notes, they will certainly know they are not in tune." Thus music master Kuang's wish for well-tuned bells was for those of later generations who knew the notes. 67 The people of the 3 dynasties acted the same as we do, and the 5 hegemons had the same level of intelligence as we. But they alone had the reality of sagely knowledge, while we lack even the reputation of a country village or the common knowledge of a poor lane. Why? It is because they set themselves straight and established their integrity, while we are rude idlers and lazy layabouts. 19/209/7, 11 Now Maoqiang and Shishi were recognized by the world as beauties, but if they were made to carry putrid rats in their mouths and be wrapped in hedgehog skins, and dress in leopard fur, 68 with waist sashes of dead snakes, even cloth wearing leather-belted ordinary people passing by all would look off to the left or right and hold their noses. But if we were to let them wear perfume and unguents, adjust their moth eyebrows, 69 put on hair clasps and earrings, dress in fine silk, and trail sleeves of chi silk gauze, with white face powder and black mascara, wearing jade sash bangles, walking with gliding steps, wearing sprigs of fragrant angelica, with enticing looks, bewitching smiles, haunting glances, speaking delicately and softly, exposing their beautiful teeth, twitching the dimples in their cheeks, then even among the great statesmen of the royal court, whose conduct displays a stern will and haughty air, there would be none who would not court these beauties, long for them, and desire to have sex with them. Nowadays a person of average talent, benighted by ignorant and deluded wisdom, cloaked in insulting and shameful conduct, who has no training in his own calling or in the techniques that are his responsibility, how could he not make people look askance at him and hold their noses? 19/209/13, 18 Now dancers twirl their bodies like rings of jade. They bend and touch the ground and turn quickly and nimbly. As they move, they twist and turn, lithe and beautiful, imitating spirits. Their bodies seem as light as wind-borne autumn floss, their hair like banners flapping in the wind, their steps are quick as those of a racehorse. Acrobats, raising poles of wutong or catalpa 70 wood and grasping crooked tree branches, are as uninhibited as monkeys. Laughing, they pull the leaves toward them, crouching and stretching like dragons, they perch on the branches like swallows. Holding thick tree limbs, they raise them effortlessly. As they dance, they rise like dragons or birds as they gather. They grasp and release, how fast they move. There is no one among the spectators who does not grow faint at heart and weak in the knees. Meanwhile, the performers continue their act with a smile and then put on the costumes for the feather dance. The dancers do not inherently have such supple and nimble bodies, the acrobats do not inherently have such keenness and strength. It was the gradual, long-term practice and training that made them so. Thus, when a tree grows, no one sees its progress. At a certain point, we realize that it has grown tall. If a hard object is continually sharpened on a whetstone, no one sees it diminishing, but at some point we realize that it is thinner. Pigweed and hyssop grow by leaps and bounds, each day adding several inches. But they cannot be used for the crossbeams of a building. With hardwoods like lindera, southernwood, or camphor, only after 7 years can their growth be recognized. Then they can be used to make coffins and boats. Thus, matters that can be accomplished easily gain small fame for the one who does them, those that are difficult to accomplish gain great merit. The superior man cultivates his good points. Even though there might not be an immediate advantage, good fortune will come later. Thus the Ode says, the days pass and the months proceed, through study of brightness and brilliance, I gain radiance and light. 71 This is what is referred to here. 19/209/20, 28. 2020.1 Heaven established the sun and moon, arranged the stars and planets, harmonized the yin and yang, and displayed the 4 seasons. The day serves to blaze things with sunlight, the evening serves to give them respite, the wind serves to dry things out, and the rain and dew serve to moisten them. In giving life to things, no one sees the means by which it nurtures them, and yet things reach maturity. In taking life away from things, no one sees the means by which it sends them off to death, and yet things cease to exist. This is called spirit illumination. Sages take it as their model. Thus, when they initiate good fortune, no one sees from whence it originates, and yet it arises. When they eradicate calamity, no one sees the means by which they do so, and yet it disappears. Move away from it, it nears. Approach it, it recedes. Search for it, it will not be obtained. Examine into it, it is not insubstantial. Reckon it by days, it is incalculable. Reckon it by years, there is surplus. 20/210/3, 620.2 When moisture comes, no one sees its form, yet the charcoal has already grown heavier. When the wind blows, no one sees its image, yet the trees have already been set in motion. The sun moves, but we do not see its movements. The great horse Kiji gallops with his back to the sun, and the grasses and trees are crushed under his hooves. Before there is enough time to set out the warning lights to announce his arrival, the sun is already in front of him. When heaven is about to send forth a strong wind, before the grasses and trees have moved, birds have already begun to soar. When it is about to send forth rain, before the dark clouds have gathered, the fish have already begun to gasp for air, for the chi of yin and yang move each other. Thus cold and heat, dryness and moistness, follow one another in accordance with their kind. Sounds and echoes reply to each other in accordance with their tone. Thus the Changes says, when the crane calls in the treetop, its babies respond to it. 320/210/8, 1220.3 When the high ancestors went into mourning, for 3 years they did not speak, and all within the 4 seas were silent and voiceless. But as soon as a single word was uttered, they greatly moved the world. This is because they relied on their heavenly heart when opening and closing their mouths. Thus, as soon as you stimulate the root, the 100 branches all respond. It is like the spring rains watering the myriad things, turbulently they flow, copiously they spread out, there is no place that is not moistened and no plant that does not thrive. 20/210/14, 16 Thus, when the sage embraces his heavenly heart, his voice can move and transform the world. Thus, when his quintessential sincerity is stimulated within, an embodied chi responds in heaven, lucky stars appear, yellow dragons descend, auspicious winds arrive, sweet springs appear, excellent grains thrive, rivers do not fill and overflow, and the seas do not churn and roil. Thus the Ode says, nurturing and yielding are the 100 spirits even to the rivers and mountain peaks. For when you oppose heaven and oppress the myriad things, the sun and moon suffer partial eclipses, the 5 planets lose their proper orbits, the 4 seasons overstep one another. In the day it is dark and at night it is light, mountains crumble and rivers flood, in winter there are thunderstorms, and in summer there are frosts. The Ode says, in the first month, frost is abundant, my heart is anxious and grieved. 5. Heaven and humanity are mutually in communication with each other. Thus when a state is endangered and perishes, the pattern of heaven changes. When an age is diluted and chaotic, rainbows appear. The myriad things are mutually linked, quintessence and baleful energy are mutually in conflict. Thus matters of spirit illumination cannot be created by wisdom and cunning, and cannot be achieved by agility and strength. What heaven and earth embrace, what yin and yang nurture, what rain and dew moisten are the myriad things that are born and live. Kingfisher feathers and sea turtle shell, pearls and jade, are colorful and bright, glistening and glossy. When rubbed, they are not scratched, kept for a long time, they do not change. Shi Zhong could not fashion them, Liu Ban could not make them. This is what is called the great skill. 20/210/18, 25:20.4 A person of Song used ivory to make a mulberry leaf for the ruler. 6. It took 3 years for him to finish it. Stem and veins, downy hairs and indentations, tenuous points and lustrous color. When it was mixed in among real mulberry leaves, one could not tell which it was. Lizzie heard this and said, if heaven and earth took 3 years to make a leaf, then among the myriad things, very few would have had leaves. Now when heaven and earth carry out their transformations, they blow and leaves emerge, they puff and leaves drop. Why does this person of song expend so much effort? Thus anything that can be measured is small, and any quantity that can be counted is few. No measurement can encompass the supremely great, no enumeration can count the supremely numerous. Thus the realm of the 9 provinces 7 cannot be measured in Qing and Mu, 8 the 8 cardinal points cannot be measured in circuits and li. Mount Tai cannot be calculated in fathoms and feet, 9 the rivers and seas cannot be measured in pecks and bushels. 10 Thus the great man conforms in potency with heaven and earth, conforms in brightness with the sun and moon, conforms in numinous efficacy with the ghosts and spirits, and conforms in trustworthiness with the 4 seasons. Thus sages embrace the chi of heaven and enfold the heart of heaven, grasp centrality and embody harmony. They do not descend from the ancestral temple, yet they journey to the 4 seas. Everywhere they alter habits and change customs, so that the people transform and become good as if it were their own natures. This is because the sages are capable of transforming others like a spirit. The Ode says, the spirits hear if in the end we are in harmony and peace. 1120/210/2720/211/520.5 Now with regard to ghosts and spirits, we look for them, but they are without form, we listen for them, but they are without voice, yet we perform the suburban sacrifice to heaven and the appropriate observances to the mountain and river spirits. With prayer and sacrifice we seek prosperity, with invocations and charms we seek rain, with tortoise shell and milfoil we decide matters. The Ode says, when the spirits might descend cannot be calculated. How can you treat them with disdain? 1220/211/5, 720.6 Heaven extends to the highest, earth extends to the thickest. The moon illuminates the nights, the sun illuminates the days. The arrayed stars are bright and clear, yin and yang transform. There is no purposeful activity in this. 13 If you rectify their ways, things will be thus of themselves. Therefore, yin and the yang cycle through 4 seasons, but not in order to generate the myriad things. Rain and dew fall in season, but not in order to nurture grasses and trees. Spirit and illumination join, yin and yang harmonize, and the myriad things are born. Thus, tall mountains and deep forests are not for the benefit of tigers and leopards. Massive trees and leafy branches are not for the benefit of flying birds. Springs flow 1,000 li, and pools plunge 100 ren, 14 but not for the benefit of flood dragons. Things reach their height and loftiness, achieve their girth and massiveness, mountains for residing and trees for perching, nests for sheltering and caves for hiding, water for soaking and land for traveling. Each reaches its state of equipoise. Now, what is large generates what is small, what is numerous generates what is scarce. This is the way of heaven. Thus, a small mound of earth cannot produce clouds and rain, and a small stream cannot produce fish and turtles because it is too small. The steamy vapor rising from cattle and horses produces maggots and lice, but the steamy vapor from maggots and lice cannot produce cattle and horses. Thus transformation is engendered from without, it is not engendered from within. 20/211/9, 1520.7 Now flood dragons crouch in deep pools, but their eggs hatch in earthen mounds. The male cloud dragon sings in a high voice, and the female sings in a low voice. Through transformation they achieve their form. This is the utmost essence. Thus when the sage nurtures his heart, nothing is better than sincerity. With utmost sincerity, he can move and transform others. Now those who possess the way amass essence inside themselves and lodge spirit within their hearts. They are quiet and indifferent, tranquil and undisturbed, with pleasure and profundity in their breasts. 15 Thus the chi of depravity has no place to tarry or obstruct. The joints of their four limbs are well articulated, their hair's vapor vents away in an orderly fashion. Thus the main axes of their bodies are harmonious and advantageous, so that none of the 100 channels and the 9 apertures fail to flow freely. Thus where the spirit dwells, it is sure to attain its proper place. How could we say that this is just a matter of soothing the joints or arranging the hair? 20/211/17, 2120.8 When a sagely ruler is in power, he is boundless and formless, quiet, and voiceless. The officials are as if devoid of tasks, the court is as if devoid of people. There are no scholars in seclusion, no people in exile, none doing forced labor, and none wrongfully mutilated. Within the four seas, none fails to look up to the ruler's moral potency or imitate the ruler's directives. The barbarian states of the Yi and the Di arrive with their respective interpreters. 16 But the sagely ruler declines to engage in disputations with their various households and persuasions with their various families. He extends the sincerity in his heart and applies it to the world, that is all. 17 The Ode says, let there be kindness in the central states, bringing tranquility to the four quarters. 18 When the interior is compliant, the exterior is peaceful. 20/211/23, 2620.9 When the great king Danfu dwelled in Bin, the Di tribes attacked him. He left with his staff and whip. The common people followed Danfu. Carrying their young, supporting their old, and shouldering their axes and earthenware pots, they traversed the Liang Mountains and established a state in Kizhu. This is not something an order could summon. 19 Duke Mu of Qin suffered the affront of having some local rustics eat the meat of his fine steeds. 20 In response he gave them fine liquor to drink. Later, at the Battle of Han Yuan, the rustics fought to the death to repay Duke Mu. This is not something a written contract could have bound them to do. Mitzi was ruling in the land of Danfu. Liumichi went to see how he had transformed the people. He observed that when people fished at night, if they caught a small fish, they let it go. This was not something that restrictive laws could prohibit. 21 When Confucius was Minister of Justice in Lu, no one threw litter on the roads, nor were prices raised in the marketplace. In tilling the fields and in fishing, people ceded to the elderly, and those with grizzled hair did not carry things. These are not things that laws could achieve. Now the reason why an arrow can be shot for a long distance and penetrate a hard substance is because the bow is strong, but the reason it can hit the tiny center of a target is due to the human heart. Rewarding goodness and punishing wickedness is for government decrees, but the reason they can be carried out depends on quintessential sincerity. Thus, though a bow may be strong, it cannot hit the target on its own. Though a decree may be enlightened, it cannot be carried out on its own. They must be grounded in quintessential sincerity. 22 In order to be effective. Thus if the ruler applies the way to the people and they do not follow him, he has not exercised a sincere heart. 20/211/26, 20/212/520.10 Heaven, earth, and the four seasons do not purposefully produce the 10,000 things. 23 Spirit and illumination join, yin and yang harmonize, and the myriad things are born. When a sage rules the world, he does not change the people's nature but soothes and facilitates the nature that is already present and purifies and cleanses it. Thus following the nature of things may be considered great, whereas making things may be considered minor. You dredged the Dragon Gate, broke through Yuk, demarcated the Yangtze River, and channeled the Yellow River so that they ran eastward into the sea, by following the natural flow of water. Lord Millet reclaimed the grasslands and introduced tillage, fertilized the soil and planted grain, enabling each of the 5 grains to grow appropriately, by following the propensity of the soil. Tang and Wu, with 300 armored chariots and 3,000 soldiers in armor, quelled the violent and rebellious and brought Xia and Shang under control, by following the people's desire. Thus if you can follow the nature of things, you will be matchless in the world. Now if things first have what is natural to them, afterward human affairs can be governed. Thus, a fine carpenter cannot carve metal, and a skillful blacksmith cannot melt wood. The propensity of metal is that it cannot be carved, and the nature of wood is that it cannot be melted. You can mold clay into a vessel, gouge out wood and make a boat, forge iron and make a blade, cast metal and make a bell. By following their inherent possibilities, you can drive a horse and lead an ox, use a rooster to announce night's end, and tell a dog to guard the gate because it follows their natures. People have a nature that is fond of sex, so there is the ceremony of marriage. They have a nature that requires food and drink, so there is the suitability of a great banquet. They have a nature that delights in music, so there are the sounds of bells, drums, pipes, and strings. They have a nature to grieve and be melancholy, so there are the customs of wearing mourning clothes, crying, and jumping about at funerals. Therefore, the institutions and laws of the former kings followed what the people liked but also established controls and civilizing restrictions for them. Following along with people's fondness for sex, they set up the rites of marriage so men and women could be properly separated. Following along with their delight in music, they rectified the sounds of the yat and song 24 so that habits and customs would not be unrestrained. Following along with their preference to live as families and find joy in their wives and children, they taught filial piety 25 so that fathers and sons would be affectionate. Following along with their delight in friendship, they taught brotherly love so that older and younger would be in proper standing with each other. Only after this did they use court ceremonies to clarify high rank and low and use rural libations 26 and archery contests to clarify adulthood and youth. In season, the youths held exercises to practice using weapons or entered school according to their station to learn to cultivate the arts of human relations. These all are cases in which people already possessed qualities by nature, which sages fashioned and completed. 20/212/7, Thus if the nature is not there, it is not possible to educate or train a person. If the nature is there but has not been nurtured, he cannot follow the way. It is the nature of the silkworm to make silk, but unless you have a skilled female worker to boil the cocoon in hot water and draw its filaments, there can be no silk. An egg transforms into a chick, but unless you have a mother hen to sit on and warm the egg and brood it for several days, it cannot produce a chick. Human nature is endowed with humaneness and rightness, but unless you have a sage to institute laws and standards to teach and guide them, people will not be able to find the correct path. Thus the teaching of the former kings was to follow what people delight in so as to encourage goodness and to follow what people hate so as to prohibit wickedness. Thus, punishments and penalties were not used, but awe-inspiring conduct seemed to flow forth everywhere. Policies and ordinances were limited, but their transforming brilliance pervaded as if they were spirit-like. Thus if you follow nature, the whole world will come along with you. If you go against nature, even if you were to publish the laws, it would be of no use. 20/212/21, 2520.11 In former times, when the 5 thearchs and the 3 kings established their policies and instituted their teachings, they inevitably used the procedures of 3s and 5s. 27 What are the procedures of 3s and 5s? Looking upward, they selected images from heaven; looking downward, they selected standards from earth. In the middle, they selected models from people. Thereupon they established the Mingtang audiences and carried out the Mingtang edicts. Looking upward, they regulated the qi of yin and yang and harmonized the nodes 28 of the 4 seasons, thereby avoiding the calamities of illness and fever. Looking downward, they observed Earth's patterns in order to devise standards and measures. They investigated the suitability of mountains and plains, rivers and water meadows, rich and poor land, and high and low areas, setting tasks to generate wealth and to eradicate the disasters of hunger and cold. In the middle, they investigated human virtues to devise rites and music and implement the way of humaneness and rightness in order to govern human relations and eradicate the calamities of violence and disorder. Thereupon they clarified and outlined the respective natures of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth in order to establish the affection that should prevail between fathers and sons so as to perfect the family. They distinguished the high and low sounds of the 5 tones and the numerology of the mutual production of the 6 double pitch pipe notes 29 in order to establish the rightness that should prevail between rulers and ministers so as to perfect the state. They studied the successive order of the 4 seasons in order to establish the propriety that should prevail between elders and the young so as to perfect bureaucratic rank. This all is called 3s. To regulate the rightness of ruler and ministers, the affection of fathers and sons, the distinction of husbands and wives, the precedence of elder and younger, the intimacy of friends, this is called 5s. Thereupon sage kings parceled out the land and made provinces for them, i.e., the people, divided up official duties and governed them, built walled cities and made residences for them, partitioned neighborhoods and differentiated them, divided up wealth and clothed and fed them, set up academies and taught and instructed them, woke them up early and rested them late, to employ and exert them. These are the cords and netting of government. That being so, if they obtain the right people they will succeed; if they fail to obtain them, they will lose. Thus when the sage Yao ruled the world, his governance and instruction were fair, and his moral potency was saturating and enriching. He was on the throne for 70 years and then sought a successor to rule the world. He sent orders to all within the 4 sacred mountains to recommend those who were low-ranking but promising. All within the 4 sacred mountains selected Shun and introduced him to Yao. Yao married his 2 daughters to Shun to see how he would manage his inner household. Then he put him in charge of 100 officials to see how he would manage external affairs. Once when Shun went into a thick forest, there were fierce winds with thunder and rain, but Shun did not lose his way. Then Yao entrusted his 9 sons to Shun, gave him the Zayahua jade, and turned over the world to him. He considered that even though there were laws and regulations, Danzu 30 was not capable of being his successor. 20/212/27, 20/213/1020.12 Now there are no things that only grow and never diminish, only succeed and never fail. Only sages can flourish and not decline and be full and not insufficient. When the divine farmer first made a chain-stringed instrument, it was in order to make people return to their spirits, suppress lewdness, and revert to their heavenly heart. By the age of decline, their excesses flowed, and they did not revert to their heavenly heart. People became lewd and too fond of sex, so that the state perished. When Kuei 31 first made music, he harmonized the 6 double pitch pipes and tuned the pentatonic notes in order to conduct the 8 winds from all directions. By the age of decline, people indulged in drunkenness and lewdness. No one paid attention to government, so that the state was wiped out. When Kengji first created writing, it was to admonish and govern all the officials and bring order to the myriad affairs. Foolish people took advantage of writing to not forget things, and the wise took advantage of it to record the affairs of state. By the age of decline, the wicked used it to inscribe falsehoods in order to free those who deserved punishment and in order to execute those who were not guilty. When Tang first built hunting parks, it was so he might furnish himself with rare viands to sacrifice in the ancestral temple, as well as to drill his officers and nobles in practicing archery and charioteering so as to guard against the unexpected, i.e., invasions. By the age of decline, people careened about in chariots chasing game and shooting arrows, wasting the common people's time and exhausting their energy. When Yao elevated Yu Xie, Lord Millet, and Gao Yao, government and education became equitable, wickedness and villainy abated, punishments and lawsuits ceased, and clothing and food sufficed. Worthies exerted themselves to do good, and the untalented embraced their moral potency. When the age came to an end, officials formed factions and cabals. Each supported only his own kind. They abandoned the common good and chased after personal gain. People outside the court and within the palace promoted one another. Wicked people occupied the court, and worthies went to live in seclusion. 20/213/12/2032 The way of heaven and earth is such that when things reach an extreme, then there is a reversal. 33 When something becomes full, then there is an emptying. The 5 colors, however bright, in time will fade. Flourishing trees and abundant grasses in time will decay. Things have both abundance and extinction, they cannot always stay the same. Thus sages, when affairs reach their limits, modify actions, when laws grow corrupt, modify regulations. It is not as if it gives them joy to alter ancient practices or to change constant rules, but they do it to save their state from defeat and ward off decline. They do away with lewdness and put a stop to wrongdoing in order to synchronize with the chi of heaven and earth and comply with what is appropriate for the 10,000 things. 20/213/22, 25:20.13 The sage covers like heaven, upholds like earth, illuminates like the sun and moon, harmonizes like yin and yang, transforms like the 4 seasons, treats the myriad things all differently, is without precedent or novelty, is without stranger or kin. Thus the sage takes heaven as his model. Heaven does not have only a single season, earth does not have only a single benefit, humankind does not have only a single affair. Therefore, various undertakings cannot but have multiple origins, hurried steps cannot but take different directions. The 5 phases are of different chi, but all are harmonious. The 6 arts are of different categories, but all are connected. Warmth and kindness, gentleness and goodness, are the influences of the odes, purity and grandeur, nobility and generosity, are the teachings of the documents, clarity and brilliance, perception and penetration, are the norms of the changes, deference and self-control, respect and humility, are the behaviors of the rites, broad-mindedness and magnanimity, simplicity and easiness, are the transforming qualities of the music, 34 reprimands and critiques, blame and appraisal, are the polishing cloths of the spring and autumn annals. Thus if relied on exclusively, the shortcoming of the changes is superstition, the shortcoming of the music is lewdness, the shortcoming of the odes is foolishness, the shortcoming of the documents is rigidity, the shortcoming of the rites is stubbornness, and the shortcoming of the spring and autumn is censoriousness. 35 The sage uses all 6 in conjunction and both prizes and institutes them. If the sage loses their root, there will be disorder, if he acquires their root, there will be order. The beauty of these classics lies in harmony, their shortcomings lie in expediency. Water, fire, metal, wood, earth, and grain differ as things, but all are used. The compass, the square, the weight, the balance beam, the level, and the marking cord differ in shape, but all are applied. Cinnabar, verdigris, glue, and lac 36 are not identical, but all are used. Everything has something for which it is appropriate, each thing is suitable for something. Wheels are round, carriage boxes are square, their shafts are parallel, their axles are crosswise, their propensities function to make them convenient. The horses at the side of a team want to gallop, the ones in the middle want to walk. 37 The sash can never be new enough, the belt hook can never be old enough, if each is properly placed, they are suitable. 20/214/1, 10 The poem Guanju 38 originated from the cry of a bird. The superior man praises it because it advocates that the female and the male should not leave their nest. The poem Lu Ming 39 originated from the cry of an animal. The superior man exalts it because it describes how deer, having found food, call to one another to share it. At the Battle of Hong, Song's army was defeated and its prince captured. The Spring and Autumn Annals exalts him because he did not attack the enemy before they had set up their formations. Bo Yi of Song sat in the fire of a burning palace and died. The Spring and Autumn Annals exalts her because she would not leave if it meant violating propriety. For perfecting endeavors and establishing affairs, how can these examples be considered excessive? Each points in a single direction and discusses it, but you can derive a general outline from them. 20/214/10, 1320.14 Wang Jiao and Qi Song removed themselves from the milieu of polluting filth and left the dust of the world behind. They inhaled the harmony of yin and yang, imbibed the essence of heaven and earth, breathing out and expelling the stale, breathing in and inhaling the new. Dancing in the void they lightly rose up, riding on clouds and floating on fog. You could say they nurtured their natures, but you could not call them filial sons. The Duke of Zhou executed Guan Shu and Cai Shu 40 to bring peace to the country and end their rebellion. You could call him a loyal minister, but you could not call him a good brother. Tang banished the tyrant Ji and King Wu of Zhou executed the tyrant Zhao so as to rid the world of cruelty and do away with evil. You could call them kind rulers, but you could not call them loyal officials. Yu Yang 41 attacked the state of Zhongshan but could not enter it. The rulers of Zhongshan boiled Yu's son, but Yu Yang ate the soup to demonstrate his awesomeness. You could call him a fine general, but you could not call him a loving father. Thus, if the sage can do something, he does it, if he cannot do it, he does not do it. If he cannot do it, he does not do it, but if he can do it, he does it. 4220/214/15, 20 Shun and Su Yu differed in their actions, but both were sages. Yi Yin and Bo Yi differed in their ways, but both were humane. Jitsi and Bai Gan differed in their inclinations, but both were worthies. Thus when using troops, some are light, some are heavy, 43 Some are greedy, some are honest. These four are opposites, yet none can be dispensed with. Light troops want to advance, heavy troops want to halt. Greedy troops want to acquire, honest troops do not take advantage of what is not theirs. Thus, courageous troops 44 can be ordered to attack but cannot be ordered just to hold a position. Heavy troops can be ordered to hold a position but cannot be ordered to press an attack. Greedy troops can be ordered to advance and seize a position but cannot be ordered to defend their post. Honest troops can be ordered to defend their post but cannot be ordered to advance and seize a position. Trustworthy troops can be ordered to hold fast to their duties but cannot be ordered to respond to alterations. 45 These four kinds are opposites. Sages use them all, depending on which is best in a given situation. Now, heaven and earth do not embrace just one thing, yin and yang do not give birth to just one kind. The sea does not reject rivers and flood waters and so becomes great. A mountain does not reject dirt and stones and so becomes high. If you hold on to one corner but lose the myriad things, if you select one thing but reject everything else, then what you gain is little, and what you can control is shallow. 20/214/2220/215/220.15 The way of a person who governs a great state cannot be small, the regulations of a person whose realm is broad cannot be narrow. The concerns of a person in a high position cannot be troublesome, the teachings of a person whose people are numerous cannot be vexatious. Now, when matters are trifling, it is difficult to control them; when laws are complex, it is difficult to implement them; when demands are numerous, it is difficult to satisfy them. If you measure something by inches, by the time you reach a fathom 46 there is bound to be a discrepancy. If you weigh things by the zu, 47 by the time you reach a dan there is sure to be an error. If you weigh by the dan and measure by the fathom, it is fast and there will be fewer mistakes. If you inspect by the strand and count by the grains, it is troublesome and there will be no accuracy. Thus, if you stay on the main track, it is easy to seem wise; if you get tangled up in tortuous debates, it is hard to seem intelligent. Thus, what contributes nothing to government but merely contributes to troublesome detail, the sage will not do. What contributes nothing to usefulness but merely contributes to expense, the wise refrains from implementing. Thus, tasks can never be too specific, affairs can never be too frugal, demands can never be too few. When tasks are specific, they are easy to accomplish; when affairs are frugal, they are easy to control; when demands are few, they are easy to satisfy. If everyone considers them easy, then using them to employ others is easy indeed. Confucius said, "Petty disputes destroy discourse, petty advantage destroys rightness, petty rightness destroys the way." If the way itself is petty, then it cannot prevail. If it prevails, it is necessarily simple. 20/215/4, 1020.16 Rivers, because they twist and turn like a snake, can be far-reaching; mountains, because they rise in stages, can be high; yin and yang, because they do not act purposefully, can be harmonious; the way, because it floats aimlessly, can transform. Now if you understand only one matter, investigate only one proposition, or master only one skill, you will be able to give a partial explanation, but you will not be able to give a comprehensive response. If you can arrange the knotweed and smartweed spices in rows, provide the bien and ou vessels with trays, 48-way firewood to kindle a fire, measure out grain and steam it, you can manage small matters, but you will not yet be able to manage large ones. If you, in circling, match the compass; in squaring, match the carpenter's square; in moving, become bestial; in stillness, become refined, you can enjoy dancing, but you cannot yet maneuver an army. If you clean the bowls and eat, wash the goblets and drink, clean your hands and offer food, you can nourish the few but not feed the multitudes. In sacrifices, the one who slaughters and cooks and skins the dog and roasts the pig, adjusting the 5 flavors, is the slaughterer. The one who sets out the vessels of rice and millet, goblets for wine and plates for meat, the bowls of fruit and sweetmeats, is the invoker. 49 The one who is uniformly brilliant and splendidly attired, the one who is deeply silent and does not speak, the one on whom the spirits depend, is the impersonator of the dead. 50 Even if the slaughterer or the invoker is incompetent, the impersonator of the dead does not step over the beakers and meat stands to replace him. 51 Thus, in stringing the se, the shorter strings are tight and the longer strings are loose. 52 In attending to affairs, the lowly toil and the noble remain idle. When Shun was the son of heaven, he plucked the 5-stringed cheen and chanted the poems of the southern airs, 53 and thereby governed the world. Before the Duke of Zhou had gathered provisions or taken the bells and drums from their suspension cords, the 4 Yi tribes submitted. 54 Zheng of Zhaoqin Shiwangdi by day decided lawsuits and by night arranged documents. Law clerks covered and connected the prefectures and counties to investigate and spy, overturning plots and detaining miscreants. He fortified the 5 peaks to defend against the Yu people and built the Great Wall to protect against the Hu tribes. But wickedness and lewdness arose, and robbers and bandits dwelt together in hordes. The more trouble he took with matters, the greater the disorder became. Thus the law is an instrument of government, but it is not the end for which one governs. It is as with bows and arrows, they are tools for hitting the bullseye, but they are not the reason one hits the bullseye. 20/215/12, 23:20.17 The Yellow Emperor said, broad and infinite, I follow heaven's way, and my chi is identical with the origin. 55 Thus, those who identify their chi with the origin are emperors, those who identify their rightness with the origin are kings, those who identify their strength with the origin are hegemons, those who lack even one of these attributes are lost. Thus when a ruler has a firm intention of attacking another state, village dogs bark in packs, roosters crow at night, weapons in the storehouse stir, and the war horses are alarmed. If now the anger dissipates and the troops are demobilized, the elderly sleep sweetly in their homes, the lanes are devoid of disgruntled crowds, and no calamity arises. Such things are not responses to the law but are stirrings of the quintessential chi. Thus if you do not speak, yet you are trustworthy, do not act, yet you are humane, do not feel anger, yet you are awe-inspiring, this is a case of your heavenly heart having moved and transformed others. If you act and you are humane, speak and you are trustworthy, feel angry and you are awe-inspiring, this is a case of your quintessential sincerity having moved others. If you act but you are not humane, speak but you are not trustworthy, feel angry but you are not awe-inspiring, this is a case of something external having caused it. Thus, if you rule by having the way, although the laws be few, they will be enough to transform the people, if you act without the way, though the laws be many, they will be only enough to cause disorder. 20/215/25, 20/216/320.18 In governing the self, it is best to nurture the spirit. The next best is to nurture the body. In governing the state, it is best to nurture transformation. The next best is to correct the laws. A clear spirit and a balanced will, the 100 joints all in good order, constitute the root of nurturing vitality. To fatten the muscles and skin, to fill the bowel and belly, to satiate the lusts and desires, constitute the branches of nurturing vitality. If the people yield to one another and compete to dwell humbly, delegate benefit and compete to receive scantily, work at tasks and compete to follow arduously, daily transformed by their superiors and move to goodness without realizing the means by which they came to be so. This is the root of government. With beneficial rewards to encourage goodness and fearful punishments to prevent misdeeds, laws and ordinances corrected above and the common people submitting below, these are the branches of government. Earlier generations nurtured the root, but later generations served the branches. This is why great peace does not arise. Now a ruler who desires to govern well does not appear in every age, and a minister who can accompany a ruler in initiating good government does not appear once in 10,000 officials. To rely on a minister who does not appear once in 10,000 to seek out a ruler who does not appear in every age is the reason why they do not meet once in 10,000 years. 20/216/5, 1020.19 The nature of water is to be saturating and clear. In valleys where it is stagnant and gives birth to green algae, that results from not controlling it according to its nature. If you make channels where it flows and deepen the flow or build up where it threatens to flood through and raise its level, you will enable it to move in compliance with its natural propensity, moving along and flowing onward. Though carrion and rotten bones flow and mix with the water, they cannot pollute it. The nature of water is not different, it is just a matter of whether it can flow through a channel or not flow through. Customs and habits are like this. If the ruler's sincerity floods through to goodness of will, builds embankments against depravity of heart, opens up the road to goodness and blocks the path to wickedness, then likewise sincerity emerges into a single way. So that the people's nature can become good and customs and habits can be beautified. 20/216/12, 1520.20 The reason why we respect BNK is not because he could prescribe medicines in accordance with the illnesses but because he could lay a hand on the breath and feel the pulse of the blood and understand from where illness derives. The reason why we respect sages is not because they set punishments in accordance with the nature of the crime but because they know from where disorder arises. If you do not cultivate the people's customs and habits yet give them free rein to fall into excess and depravity, and then you pursue them with punishments and restrain them with laws, though you maim and plunder everyone in the world, you will not be able to stop them. Yu arose, Xia reigned, Ji arose, Xia was lost. Tang arose, Yin reigned, Zhao arose, Yin was lost. It was not that laws and measures did not exist. Rather, the cord and netting of good order were not extended, and so customs and habits deteriorated. 20/216/17, 2120.21 The laws of the three dynasties are not lost. If an age is not well governed, it is because rulers lack the wisdom of the three dynasties. The 6 double pitch pipes all exist. If no one hears them, it is because they lack the ear of music master Kuang. Thus though laws exist, they must await a sage and only then can there be good government. Though pitch pipes are complete, they must await an ear and only then can they be heard. Thus, the reason why a state survives is not because it has laws but because it has worthies. The reason why a state perishes is not because it has no laws but because it has no sages. Duke Xian of Jin wanted to attack you, but Gong's Heike 56 was there. Because of this, Duke Xian could not sleep at night and found his food tasteless, yet he still dared not send in his soldiers. He made gifts of precious jades and fine horses. Gong's Heike remonstrated with the ruler of Yu but was not heeded. When his words were not put into practice, Gong's Heike crossed the border and left the state. Sun Shi attacked, and his soldiers, without bloodying their blades, seized the treasures and led the horses back to Jin. Thus preserving a state does not depend on whether the moats and walls are firm and strong, the success of an attack does not depend on a vehicle with a battering ram that can break down walls. Rather, it is a matter of having a worthy or losing him. Thus, Zhang Wuzhong 57 used his wisdom to preserve Lu, and no one in the world could cause it to fall. Chu Boyu used his humaneness to keep Wei intact, and no one in the world could threaten it. The Changes says, luxuriant is the mansion, impoverished the family. Peer through the gate, the solitude of no one there. 58 No one there does not refer to the multitudes of the common people. It means that there is no sage to govern the inherent patterns of things. 20/216/23, 20/217/220.22 If the people have no honesty and shame, they cannot be governed well. If they do not cultivate propriety and rightness, honesty and shame will not be established. If the people do not know propriety and rightness, the laws cannot rectify them. If they do not esteem the good and reject the wicked, they cannot incline toward propriety and rightness. Without laws, you cannot create good government, and without knowing propriety and rightness, you cannot implement laws. The laws can execute the unfilial, but they cannot inspire people to achieve the conduct of Confucius and Zhengzi. The laws can punish robbers, but they cannot inspire people to achieve the honesty of Bo Yi. Confucius's disciples numbered 70, and they supported 3,000 followers. All were filial when inside their households and brotherly when outside their households. Their speech was refined and elegant, and their conduct was ceremonious and exemplary. This was accomplished through education. Those who served Mozi numbered 180. He could send them all to walk through fire and tread on blades, face death, and not turn their heels to flee. This was brought about by the process of transformation. Now, to slice through muscle and flesh and puncture skin and hide, making wounds so that blood flows, is extremely difficult to bear. But the people of you do it to seek glory. 59 When a sage king is in power, he clarifies likes and dislikes to instruct the people, sets out criticism and praise to guide the people, admires the worthy and promotes them, derides the unworthy and demotes them. He does not suffer the hardship of being wounded and bleeding, yet enjoys a lofty reputation that is respected and manifest through the ages. Who among the people would not follow him? 20/217/4, 1120.23 In ancient times, laws were established, but they were not violated, punishments were elaborated, but they were not used. It is not the case that they could punish but did not punish. The 100 kinds of artisans adhered to the seasons, and their many achievements were, without exception, brilliant. Propriety and rightness were cultivated, and the worthy and the virtuous were employed. Thus they promoted the loftiest in the world to become the 3 dukes, 60 the loftiest in the state to become the 9 ministers, 61 the loftiest in the counties to become the 27 grandees, and the loftiest in the prefectures to become the 81 functionaries. Those whose knowledge surpassed 10,000 men were called talented, those whose knowledge surpassed 1,000 men were called eminent, those whose knowledge surpassed 100 men were called brave, those whose knowledge surpassed 10 men were called prominent. Those who understood the way of heaven, investigated the patterns of earth, penetrated human feelings, whose greatness sufficed to accommodate the multitudes, whose moral potency sufficed to embrace the distant, whose trustworthiness sufficed to unify heterogeneity, and whose knowledge sufficed to understand alteration were the talented among men. Those whose moral potency sufficed to transform the people through education, conduct sufficed to accord with rightness, humaneness sufficed to win the multitudes, and brilliance sufficed to illuminate those below were the eminent among men. Those whose conduct sufficed to be ceremonious and exemplary, knowledge sufficed to resolve deceptive resemblances, honesty enabled them to distribute resources, trustworthiness enabled them to inspire others to honor their commitments, accomplished deeds could be emulated, and spoken words could be used for guidance were the brave among men. Those who held to their duties and did not abandon them, dwelled in rightness and were not partisan, encountered hardships and did not illicitly avoid them, and perceived advantages and did not illicitly gain from them were the prominent among men. The talented, eminent, brave, and prominent each in accordance with their degree of ability occupied their official position and attained what was appropriate to each. From the root flowing to the branches, using the heavy to control the light, when the ruler called, the people harmonized, when the ruler moved, the lowly followed. Within the 4 seas, all submitted with a single mind, turning their backs on greed and avarice and turning toward humaneness and rightness. In transforming the people, they resembled the wind stirring the grasses and trees, leaving nothing unaffected. 6220/217/13, 2220.24 Now, if the foolish educate the wise and the unworthy lead the worthy, even if punishments and penalties are made harsher, the people will not follow them. The small cannot prevail over the great, the weak cannot dominate the strong. Thus, the sagely ruler promotes the worthy in order to establish merit, while the unworthy ruler promotes those whose views are the same as his own. King Wen promoted Grand Duke Wang 63 and Duke Shi of Zhao and became king. Duke Huan of Qi appointed Guanzhong and Shi Peng 64 and became hegemon. These are examples of elevating worthies in order to establish merit. Fu Ke of Wu employed Great Steward Pai and was destroyed. Qin employed Li Si 65 and Zhao Gao 66 and perished. These are cases of promoting those whose views are the same as his own. Thus, by observing who is being promoted, order and disorder can be observed. By examining with whom one forms a faction, the worthy and unworthy can be assessed. 20/217/24, 2820.25 When a sage coils, it is because he seeks to extend. When he bends, it is because he seeks to straighten. Thus, though he travels along a crooked road and journeys along a dark path, it is because he wishes to elevate the great way and achieve great merit. Similarly, if you emerge from the depths of a forest, you will not be able to follow a straight course. If you rescue a drowning person, you will not be able to avoid wetting your feet. Yin was anxious that the world was not well governed, so blending and harmonizing the 5 flavors, with cauldron and cutting board on his back, he journeyed 5 times to Ji, 5 times to Tang, hoping to make the turbid clear and the endangered secure. The Duke of Zhou was the arms and legs of the House of Zhou and the props and shelter of King Cheng. Guanshu and Cai Shu supported Prince Lufu, 67, wanting to carry out a rebellion, but the Duke of Zhou executed them to stabilize the world. Fate left him no alternative. Guanzi was anxious over the decline of the House of Zhou and the forceful aggressions of the lords of the land. The Yi and Di tribes attacked the central states. The people could not secure a peaceful place to live. Thus he bore shame and insult to remain alive because, anxious about the Yi and Di calamities, he hoped to pacify the chaos of the Yi and Di. Confucius hoped to implement the way of the true kings. East and west, south and north, despite making 70 persuasions, there was no place where he could find a ruler to match his teachings. Thus he went along with the Lady of Wei 68 and Mi Zixia 69 in the hopes that by their intervention he could carry through the way. These all are cases of sages desiring to bring peace and eradicate decadence. They tried from deep darkness to proceed to brilliant light, to act through expediency to bring about goodness. 20/218/1, 820.26 Evaluate those who pursue by what they bring back, evaluate those who flee by where they end up. Thus Shun banished his younger brother, the Duke of Zhou executed his older brothers, but they both alike were considered humane. Duke Wen of Jin planted rice, Zhengzi yoked a goat, but they both alike were considered wise. In the present age, evil inevitably poses as goodness in order to explain itself, depravity inevitably cloaks itself in uprightness to make excuses for itself. When wandering, i.e., serving as a freelance political advisor, to not assess your host state; when serving, to not choose your own office; when acting, to not avoid defilement, people call this the way of Yin. When there is division, differentiation, and competition for resources, when relatives and brothers hold grudges against one another, when bone and flesh rob each other, people call this the rightness of the Duke of Zhou. When actions are devoid of integrity or shame, when disgrace does not result in death. 70 people call this the subservience of Guanzi. When there is circulation of gifts and bribes, hastening to the gates of the powerful, establishment of the private and abandonment of the public, forming of cabals to solicit the ruler's favor. People call this the techniques of Confucius. Such practices cause the distinction between the superior man and the petty man to become confused, so that no one knows whether something is right or wrong. Thus, 100 streams may flow at once, but those that do not flow to the sea are not considered river valleys. Some people hasten, some amble, but those that do not turn their steps toward goodness will not become superior men. Thus, good speech comes down to what can be carried out, good action comes down to humaneness and rightness. Tian Zifang and Duan Ganmu scorned rank and salary and valued their persons. They did not allow desire to harm their lives, they did not allow profit to ensnare their bodies. Li Ke exhausted the strength of his arms and legs in order to direct and arrange the 100 officials and to be on good terms with the myriad people, enabling his ruler in life to be free of wasteful endeavors, in death to be free of a legacy of anxiety. These were men whose actions differed but who alike turned their steps toward goodness. Zhang Yi and Suqin had no permanent homes in which to dwell and personally did not serve any particular ruler, but they negotiated the vertical and horizontal alliances and made plans that overturned and toppled the states, confusing and disordering the world, disturbing and deceiving the lords of the land, causing the 100 surnames to have no leisure to report their whereabouts. 71 Sometimes following the vertical alliance, sometimes following the horizontal alliance, sometimes uniting the numerous and weak, sometimes supporting the wealthy and powerful. These were men who differed in their conduct but who alike turned their steps toward depravity. Thus the errors of the superior man are like solar or lunar eclipses. 72 What harm do they do to their brilliance? The approbations of the petty man are like a dog barking at the sunrise or an owl appearing at sunset. In what way do they augment their excellence? 20/218/10, 2120.27 Now, the wise man does not behave recklessly, the brave man does not act rashly. He selects what is good and does it, he calculates what is right and practices it. Thus when his endeavors end, his merit suffices to be relied on, when his body expires, his reputation suffices to be praised. Though you possess wisdom and ability, you must take humaneness and rightness as their basis, only then is it possible to establish your rule. Wise and capable, hasty or slow, when 100 situations arise simultaneously, the sage uniformly uses humaneness and rightness as his level and his marking cord. One who takes this to be central is called a superior man, one who does not take this to be central is called a petty man. Though the superior man dies, his reputation does not perish. Though the petty man attains power, his transgressions do not dissipate. To get someone with his left hand to take a writ for the world and with his right hand to cut his own throat, this is something even a fool would not do, because his person is more precious than the world. 73 If he should die in a disaster affecting his ruler or his loved ones, the superior man would look upon death merely as a return, because rightness is weightier than his person. Obtaining the whole world is a great benefit, but compared to your person, it is trifling. Yet the weightiness of your person, compared to rightness, is insubstantial. Rightness is what must be kept intact. The Ode states, kind and gracious is the superior man, in seeking prosperity he has no regrets. 74 This refers to taking humaneness 75 and rightness as his level and his marking cord. 20/218/23, 29. 20.28 Those who have the ability to accomplish the work of hegemon or king are invariably those who gain victory, those who have the ability to gain victory are invariably those who are powerful, those who have the ability to be powerful are invariably those who employ the people's strength, those who have the ability to employ the people's strength are invariably those who gain the people's hearts, those who have the ability to gain the people's hearts are invariably those who gain mastery over the self. Thus, the heart is the root of the self is the root of the state. There has never been a person who gained the self and lost the people, there has never been a person who lost the self and gained the people. Thus, to establish the basis of order, you must exert yourself to secure the people. The root of securing the people lies in sufficiency of use, the root of sufficiency of use lies in not taking them from their seasonal work. The root of not taking them from their seasonal work lies in reducing endeavors, the root of reducing endeavors lies in regulating desires, the root of regulating desires lies in reverting back to nature. It has never been possible to agitate the root yet calm the branches, to pollute the source yet purify the flow. 20/219/1, 6 Thus, those who know the essential qualities of nature do not endeavor to make nature do what it cannot do. Those who know the essential qualities of fate are not anxious about what fate cannot control. Thus, those who do not erect lofty palaces and terraces do not do so because they cherish trees, those who do not cast massive bells and tripods do not do so because they cherish metal. They straightforwardly put into practice the essential qualities of nature and fate so that their regulations and measures can be taken to constitute a standard for the myriad people. Now when the eyes delight in the 5 colors, the mouth relishes enticing flavors, the ears are enraptured by the 5 sounds, the 7 orifices struggle with one another and harm your nature, daily attracting wicked desires and disturbing its heavenly harmony. If you cannot govern the self, how can you govern the world? Thus if in nurturing the self you achieve regulation, then in nurturing the people you will win their hearts. 20/219/8, 11 The expression taking possession of the world does not refer to holding power and position, accepting hereditary rank, or being referred to by a respectful title. It means linking up with the strength of the world and winning the hearts of the world. The territory of the tyrant Zhao to the left reached the eastern sea and to the right reached to the Sea of Sands. Before him lay Jiazai and behind him lay Yudu. 76 His armies climbed Rong Pass and reached the Pu River. Their warriors numbered in the tens and hundreds of thousands, but they all shot their arrows backward and fought with their halberds turned toward the tyrant. King Wu of Zhou with his left hand held a yellow battle axe and with his right grasped a white banner 77 to direct his armies, and the enemy were shattered like broken tiles and fled, collapsing like a pile of earth. The tyrant Zhao had the title of the one who faces south, i.e., the ruler, but lacked the praise of even a single man. This is how he lost the world. Thus Ji and Zhao cannot be considered to have been true kings, and kings Tang and Wu cannot be considered to have banished them. The Zhou people dwelled in the lands of Feng and Hao. Their territory did not exceed 100 li, yet they swore an oath against the tyrant Zhao at Mulberry Field and attacked and occupied the Yin state. They held a memorial service at the ancestral temple of Tang the Victorious, conferred a plaque at the gates of the village where Shangrong lived, built up the tomb of Baigan, and released the imprisoned Jitsi. Only then did they snap the drumsticks and destroy the drums of war, 78 retire the 5 kinds of weapons, 79 release the oxen and the horses, gather up the jade insignia tablets, 80 and accept the fealty of the world. The people lit. The 100 surnames sang ballads to celebrate them while the lords of the land, grasping gifts of exotic birds, came calling at their court, for the hearts of the people had been won. 20/219/13, 2020.29 King Helu of Wu 81 attacked Chu and, after 5 battles, entered the capital Ying. He burned the grain in the tall granaries, destroyed the 9 dragon array of bells, flogged King Ping's tomb, and occupied King Zhao's 82 palace. King Zhao escaped to Sui. With fathers and elder brothers carrying the young and supporting the old, the 100 surnames followed him. They roused one another to courage and directed it at the enemy, committing their lives, they raised their bare arms and fought with them. At this time, without a general to lead them, they still fell into formation, each man risking his life, and forced the Wu armies to retreat, regaining their Chu territory. King Ling of Chu built the Zhanghua Tower and initiated the Gankai expedition. Inside and outside the state, everyone was disturbed and agitated. The common people were wearied and exhausted. Qiji, availing himself of popular resentment, set up Prince Bai as king, 83 but the common people cast him aside and abandoned him so that, suffering starvation in Gankai, with only weeds to eat and water to drink, he pillowed his head on a mound of earth and died. The mountains and rivers of the state of Chu had not altered, the land and its territory had not changed, the people and their nature were no different. But with King Zhao, the people led one another and sacrificed for him, with King Ling, the people turned their backs in rebellion and abandoned him. This is the difference between winning the people and losing them. Thus when the Son of Heaven attains the way, he is secure even among the 4 Yi tribes of barbarians, when the Son of Heaven loses the way, he is secure only among the lords of the land. When the lords of the land attain the way, they are secure even among the 4 neighboring states. When the lords of the land lose the way, they are secure only within the 4 boundaries of their own states. Thus Tang began with the 70 li area of Bo, and King Wen originally governed the 100 li of Feng, but they both could have their decrees enforced, and what they forbade was eradicated all over the world. When the Zhou dynasty fell into decay, the Rong attacked Earl Fan 84 at Chuchu, seized him, and carried him off. Thus, he who attains the way can command the lords of the land, though he may have only 100 li of territory. He who loses the way, though he may rule the world, is still greatly frightened within his core domain. Thus it is said, do not rely on the fact that others do not seize you, but rely on the fact that you cannot be seized. If you implement the way of someone who could be seized, even if you do not conduct yourself like someone who might be usurped or murdered, it would be of no use in gaining control of the world. 20/219/22, 20/220/320.30. As a general rule, people survive by means of clothing and food. Now if you lock them in a dark room, though you nourish them with fine delicacies, though you clothe them with embroidered garments, they will be incapable of joy because their eyes have nothing to look upon, and their ears having nothing to listen to. If they were to peek through a narrow crack and see even rain or fog, they would laugh happily. How much more so if they were to open the door and fling apart the shutters so that from total darkness they could see bright light. If from total darkness they were to see bright light so that they were extremely happy, how much more so if they were to leave the room and take a seat in the hall where they could see the light of the sun and moon. Seeing the light of the sun and moon, they would be boundlessly joyful. How much more so if they were to ascend Mount Tai, stride the stony peak, and gaze toward the 8 extremities, observing the constellation Tiandu 85 as if it were their canopy and the Yangtze and Yellow rivers as if they were their belts, with the myriad things between them. Would not their joy be indescribably great? 20/220/5, 9. Moreover, with a deaf person, the form of the ears is complete, but he is incapable of hearing. With a blind person, the form of the eyes exists, but he is incapable of sight. Now, with speech, we communicate ourselves to others; with hearing, others communicate themselves to us. A dumb person cannot speak, a deaf person cannot hear. If one is deaf and dumb, the human way cannot be communicated. Thus those who are afflicted with both deafness and dumbness, though they may impoverish their families seeking a cure, will not begrudge the cost. Do only the form and body suffer from deafness and dumbness? The heart and mind also suffer such ailments. Now if a finger is crooked, no one would fail to try to straighten it, but if the heart is obstructed, no one knows enough to strive to unblock it. This is to be confused about the relative categories of things. Suppose you were to comprehend the breadth and loftiness of the 6 arts, to penetrate the depth and profundity of the way and its potency, to reach where there is nothing above, to go where there is nothing below, to join with what has no limit, to soar where there are no forms. To be more expansive than the 4 seas, to be loftier than Mount Tai, to be richer than the Yangtze and Yellow rivers, to penetrate boundlessly, to shine brilliantly, so that between heaven and earth there would be nothing to deter you. If you possess the means to inspect and observe the world like this, would not that be indescribably great? 20/220/11, 1620.31. What people know is superficial, yet things change ceaselessly. If previously you did not know something and now you know it, it is not that your capacity to know has increased but that there has been an augmentation of inquiry and learning. Things that are frequently seen become known. Things that are frequently done become doable. Thus if you have suffered calamities, you will take precautions. If you have endured hardships, you will achieve solutions. Now if you were to rely on the longevity of a single lifetime to survey 1,000 years' knowledge and the theories of past and present, even if they did not increase as you were studying them and their way and patterns were all plainly apparent, it cannot be said that there is a technique for doing so. 20/220/18, 20. If someone wants to know the height of something but is unable to do so, if you instruct him in the use of the sighting tube 86 and the level, he will be pleased. If someone wants to know the weight of something but cannot, if you teach 87 him to employ the weight and balance beam, he will be happy. If someone wants to know the distance of something but is unable to do so, if you teach him to use metalize 88, he will be delighted. How much more would a person be pleased to understand how to respond to all things limitlessly? To face great hardships and not become fearful, to see many errors yet not become confused, to be at ease and self-possessed. How can such joy as this really be just the happiness derived from a single pleasure? Now as for the way, those that have form are engendered by it, is it not their closest of kin? Those who eat grain and ingest chi receive them from it, is it not the most gracious of rulers? Those who possess every kind of wisdom all learn from it, is it not the broadest of teachers? If an archer shoots many times without hitting the target, if someone then instructs him in how to use an aiming device, 89 he will be happy. How much more so if someone instructs him in what gives rise to the aiming device? 20/220/22, 2620.32 Now there is no one who does not know that study is good for you, but some cannot study because they have been harmed by amusements and pastimes. People all often harm what is useful with what is useless. Thus their knowledge is not broad, and their days are not sufficient. If you use the power expended to make a man-made lake to plow instead, then the fields will certainly be open to cultivation. If you use earth piled up high as mountains to build dikes instead, then the water will certainly be enough for our uses. 90 If you use the cost of feeding dogs and horses and swans and geese to nourish scholars instead, then your reputation will certainly be glorious. If you use the days you might spend shooting and hunting and gambling at Liubo to recite the odes and read the documents instead, then your understanding and knowledge will certainly be vast. Thus when we compare failure to study with studying, it is like comparing the deaf and dumb with unimpaired people. 20/220/28, 20/221/220.33 As a general rule, those who study can understand the distinction between the heavenly and the human and can comprehend the root of order and disorder. With a calm heart and clear mind to sustain them, observing the ends and beginnings of things, it can be said that their knowledge is all-embracing. What heaven creates includes birds, beasts, plants, and trees. What humankind creates includes rites, ceremonies, regulations, and measures. By building, people create palaces and rooms; by fabricating, people create boats and carts. The roots of the means to create order are humaneness and rightness, the branches of the means to create order are laws and measures. What people use to serve the living is the root, what people use to serve the dead is the branches. Roots and branches constitute a single body. What both of them cherish is a single nature. One who places the root first and the branches behind is called a superior man. One who uses the branches to harm the root is called a petty man. The natures of the superior man and the petty man are not different, rather, it is a question of their priorities. What is rich and flourishing about plants and trees is their roots, and what can die is their branches. According to the nature of animals, the head is big and the tail is small. If the branches are larger than the root, they will snap. If the tail is larger than the middle, it will not wag. Thus, feed the mouth and the 100 joints will be plump, water the roots and the branches and leaves will be beautiful. It is the nature of heaven and earth that things have roots and branches. In nurturing things there are priorities. When it comes to ordering humankind, how can there not be a beginning and an end? Thus humaneness and rightness are the root of order. Now if you do not know to try to cultivate the root and strive to order the branches, this amounts to neglecting the root yet watering the branches. 20/221/4, 12 Moreover, the genesis of law was as something to support 91 humaneness and rightness. Now if you emphasize law and abandon humaneness and rightness, this is prizing the hat and shoes yet forgetting the head and feet. Thus humaneness and rightness are meant to reinforce the foundation. If you extend a structure's length without increasing its thickness, it will collapse; if you increase a structure's height without expanding its foundation, it will topple. Zhao Zhengqin Shihuangdi did not add to his moral potency but piled up his eminence, so he was destroyed. Earl Ji did not practice humaneness and rightness but strove to expand his territory, so he was lost. The Discourses of the States says, if we do not use a large beam, it cannot bear the weight. Nothing is so heavy as a country, and no beam can be compared to moral potency. 92 If the ruler of a state has his people behind him, it is like a wall having a foundation and a tree having roots. If the roots are deep, the tree will be stable; if the foundation is excellent, then the top of the wall will be secure. 20/221/14, 1820.34 The way of the five thearchs and the three kings constitutes the warp and weft of the world and the rules and standards of order. Now Shang Yang's opening and closing, 93 Shenz's three tests, 94 Han Fei's solitary indignation, 95 and Zhang Yi's and Siqin's horizontal and vertical alliance system, 96 all were selective expediencies, one slice of the arts of governance. They are not the great root of order or the constant norm of service that can be heard widely and transmitted through the ages. The Chu Prime Minister Zinang 97 retreated and kept Chu intact, but retreating cannot be taken as a universal principle. Xiangao used deceit to preserve Zheng, 98 but deceit cannot be taken as a constant principle. Now the sounds of the Yat and Song 99 all originated as verbal expressions and are rooted in human emotion, thus they serve to establish harmony between ruler and minister and affection between father and son. The music of Shao and Xia 100 penetrates metal and stone and infuses plants and trees. Now if you appropriate the sounds of remorse and longing and express them with strings and woodwinds, then those who hear these tones will be lustful or sorrowful. If lustful, they will disorder the distinction between male and female. If sorrowful, they will stir the chi of remorse and longing. How can this be called music/joy? 101 When King Yumu of Zhao 102 wandered in exile in Fangling, he longed for his hometown and wrote the poem Mountains and Trees. None who heard it could hold back their tears. When Jing Kai went west to try to stab to death the king of Qin, 103 Gao Jianli and Song Yi struck the Zhu 104 and sang on the banks of the Yi River. Of those who heard this music there were none who did not stare angrily with wide open eyes and with hair standing on end under their caps. If in response, one were to use sounds of that sort to create music to be brought into the ancestral hall, how could that be the music/joy referred to by the ancients? Thus ceremonial caps and carriages of state 105 are things that can be used but not enjoyed. The mixture of flavors in the Taigan 106 can be eaten but not savored. Instruments of vermilion lacquer and silk strings that drip and surge with emotion, so that for every note there are three sighs, such music can be heard but does not bring happiness. Thus, what has no sound sets the standard for what can be heard, what has no taste sets the standard for what can be tasted. Lustful sounds are clear to the ear, and full flavors are pleasing to the mouth, but these are not to be prized. 20/221/20, 30 Thus, matters that do not have their basis in the way and its potency cannot be taken as models. Words that do not accord with those of former sage-kings cannot be taken as the way. Tones, i.e., sung poetry that are not grounded in the verbal expressions of the Yat and the Song cannot be taken as proper music. Thus one may pick and choose among the sayings of these five masters 107 as a means to facilitate persuasions, but they are not the pervading principles of the world. 20/222/1, 2 When the sage kings established governance and implemented education, they invariably examined their ends and beginnings. When they publicly posted laws and set up standards, they invariably traced their roots and branches to their source. They did not simply prepare one policy to address one thing at a time and leave it at that. Seeing the beginnings, they would ponder the outcomes. Observing the sources, they would know the currents. Thus, they implemented policies widely without exhausting themselves, they long endured without defiling themselves. Now, water emerges from the mountains but flows into the sea. Crops are born in the field but are stored in the granaries. Sages, by seeing where things are born, know where they will end up. Thus, shone buried gold deep under the dangerous mountain cliffs to thwart the hearts of those who were covetous and greedy. Yi Di made wine. You drank it and found it tasty, so he exiled Yi Di and forbade wine-making so as to prevent dissolute conduct. Master Yan 108 played for Duke Ping the music of the northern border area, but music master Kuang said, "This is the kind of music that can destroy a state." The Duke sighed loudly and forbade it in order to stop the tide of lewdness and disorder. Thus, When the people became aware of writing, potency declined. When the people became aware of counting, generosity declined. When the people became aware of bonds and contracts, trustworthiness declined. When the people became aware of tricks and skills, unself-consciousness 109 declined. When craftiness and deceit hide in your breast, innocence and purity will not be complete, and your spirit-engendered potency will not be intact. 20/222/41020.36 The SE does not make a sound, but each of its 25 strings responds to its own respective tone. The axle of a cart does not revolve, but each of its 30 spokes contributes its respective strength to the turning of the wheel. Only when all strings have their appropriate tension and size is it possible to create a tune. 110 Only through appropriately hard or easy pulling and appropriate moving and stopping is it possible for a cart to travel far. What causes things to sound has no sound. What enables things to journey 1,000 li does not move. Thus, when high and low follow different ways, there is order. When they follow the same way, there is disorder. When those in high position take the great way, things go smoothly. When matters are great but the way is small, things go badly. Thus, trifling pleasures harm rightness, trifling cleverness harms the way, trifling debates harm order, unwarranted harshness injures moral potency. Great administration is not precipitous, thus the people are easy to lead. Supreme government is magnanimous, thus those below do not plunder one another. 111 Supreme moral potency 112 reverts to simplicity, thus the people have no vices. 20/222/12, 1620.37 Shangyang, on behalf of the state of Qin, established laws of collective responsibility, and the common people hated them. Wu Qi, on behalf of the state of Chu, extended rules abolishing ranks and salaries, and meritorious officials rebelled. Shangyang's setting up laws and Wu Qi's use of military power are things the world approved of. But Shangyang's use of laws destroyed Qin. He investigated the traces of knives and brushes, i.e., writings, but did not know the root of government or disorder. Wu Qi's use of military power weakened Chu. He was familiar with matters of military formations but did not understand the expediency of fighting from the temple, i.e., advance planning. 113 Duke Xian of Jin attacking the Lirong and taking their princess was not a bad thing in itself, but historian Su 114 sighed about it when he saw that it would bring disaster to 4 generations of the Duke's clan. King Fuke of Wu defeated Qi at Ailing and defeated Jin at Huangqi. 115 He did not fail to win victories, yet Wu's issue 116 was saddened by them because he foresaw that his ruler would certainly be taken prisoner in Yu. Gongzi Xiaobo 117 fled to Ju, and Chang'er 118 fled to Cao. They were not unbeleaguered, but Bao Shuyat and maternal uncle Fan followed and assisted them, knowing they, i.e., their rulers Xiaobo and Chang'er would rise to become hegemons. King Gujian of Yu ensconced himself in Gaiji, working on political matters without limit and making plans without rest, knowing that calamity could be turned into good fortune. Marquis Xiang of Zhao won successive victories but had a mournful countenance, fearing that good fortune would become calamity. Duke Huan of Qi lost the fields of Binyang but became hegemon. Earl Ji seized the land of the 3 states of Jin but was destroyed. Sages perceive good fortune though hidden within multiple screens, perceive bad fortune though obscured beyond 9-fold curtains. 20/222/18, 2620.38 The Yuan Tian silkworm 119 in 1 year can be harvested twice. It is not that this is not profitable, but the royal laws prohibit it because of the harm it does to the mulberry trees. Stalks of rice resulting from scattered seeds of the previous year ripen first, but the farmer weeds them out because he would not, for the sake of this small benefit, harm the great harvest. With family elders, different rice is used to feed them, different utensils are used to prepare food for them. Children and wives ascend the hall barefoot, kneel, and pour the broth for the elders. It is not that these practices are without cost, but they are not things on which one can economize because that would injure rightness. Awaiting the marriage maker to seal the marriage contract, exchanging the wedding presents to select a wife, donning wedding attire to escort the bride home to your relations, it is not that these practices are without annoyances. But they are not things that can be changed because they serve to hinder licentiousness. One can get the people in their residences to watch one another and, when there are crimes, to report on one another. As a method for exposing traitors, this is not without efficacy, but such methods are not practiced as they injure an atmosphere of peaceful and harmonious hearts and give rise to hateful and revengeful resentments. Thus with endeavors, though you bore only one hole, you open up 100 fissures, though you plant only one tree, you engender 10,000 leaves? What you have bored is not enough to be considered useful, but what you have opened up is enough to bring ruin. What you have planted is not enough to bring a profit, but what you have produced is enough to make a mess. 120 The fool is beguiled by petty benefits and forgets their great harm. This cannot be considered exemplary. Calamus deters fleas and lice, but people do not make mats out of it because it attracts centipedes. 121 Foxes catch mice, but they cannot be turned loose in the courtyard because they will seize chickens. Thus there are some endeavors that bring small benefit but great harm, gain something here but lose something there. Thus in playing chess, one may capture 2 pieces yet experience defeat, one may give up a piece yet win victory. 20/222/28, 20/223/920.39 Stealing advantage cannot be practiced, understanding technique cannot be taken as a model. Thus humaneness and wisdom are the splendid aspects of human talent. Humaneness means to love others, wisdom means to understand others. If you love others, you will refrain from cruel punishments, if you know others, you will refrain from chaotic governance. When political order derives from culture and principles, there will be no perverse or erroneous endeavors. When punishments are not excessive, there will be no violent and cruel conduct. If above there is no troublesome and disorderly governance, below there will be no resentful and expectant hearts, so that the 100 forms of cruelty will be eradicated and centrality and harmony will be created. This is the means by which the 3 dynasties flourished. Thus the document says, if the ruler is wise and kind, the black-haired people will cherish him. Why fear Huando? Why banish the Miao? 122 Earl Ji possessed 5 talents that surpassed others, but he could not avoid dying by another's hand, for he did not love others. The king of Qi had skills in 3 areas that surpassed those of others, but he was taken prisoner in Qin, for he did not understand worthy men. Thus, there is no humaneness greater than loving others, there is no wisdom greater than understanding others. If you have neither of these, even if you are perceptive and smart, clever and skillful, and work hard and untiringly, you will not avoid disorder. 20/223/11, 17